She really smoking on the cover. I mean, I could see when you're like 25 thinking that's cool, but. Right. Beer Money by Francis Stroh, a memoir of privilege and loss. I think this is chapter 4. I don't know if there's an actual chapter counting since it's a memoir. I don't know if it's. No, it doesn't seem like it is counted in chapters. But we're on the fourth section, so. Mary Catherine Robertson and Gail Robertson, circa 1939, by Norman Robertson. My mother loved to drive cross country. She took us everywhere by car. Florida, Martha's Vineyard, New Jersey, running up the miles on the odometer, even during the energy crisis in the 70s. We would stop to nap in rest areas along the highways, the police sometimes knocking on our windows to wave us on. If the trip required an overnight stay and no cheap motels were available, we'd sleep on a community center floor or in the back seat. If my father came along on the trip, we'd stay at a Howard Johnson's or a Holiday Inn, the lap of luxury, until the car finally rolled into our resort or rental house. Why did you drive? My cousins Pierre and Freddie would demand when we arrived at the oceanside resort. On Sanibel Island, candy wrappers and Coke cans littering the floor of a car. Flying and then renting a car is a waste of money, my mother would tell them. It's more fun to drive anyway, I would lie. Besides, we got to go to Disney World. Running out of gas was my mother's specialty. We'd sputter to a stop at the side of the interstate, and she'd take our hands and march us along the shoulder of the freeway to the gas station at the next exit. A free-spirited eccentric trapped in the life of a 1950s housewife, my mother would have been a hippie had she come of age in the 60s. She spent her childhood in Llewellyn Park, a spacious, wooded, residential enclave in central New Jersey, outrunning her oppressive nanny at every turn. Red-haired, freckled, and perpetually band-aided on both knees, my mother was the tomboy in the family, while her much older sister Frances received the lion's share of their parents' attention. With her raven black hair and classical features and her admirable skill on horseback, Frances was the image of the perfect wartime debutante, and was even pictured as such in a 1944 issue of Life magazine. My mother's father, Norman Robertson, was an engineer of Scottish descent who ran a family business that produced hydraulic pumps for clients like Thomas Edison, the family's neighbor up the road, an amateur jazz pianist, and the life of every party. My grandfather entertained his many friends with Cole Porter while they fed him cocktails at the piano. My grandmother, Mary Robertson, also loved parties, and she and Norman made an especially compatible pair. At the end of the night, she would help him home. As a girl, my mother would find her father in the kitchen the following morning, puffy-eyed and bathrobed, hunched over a pint of coffee ice cream. He craved the sugar, she told us years later, but the cholesterol may be the reason he died so young. Even during the Great Depression, the family was well-to-do, although my mother never forgot the sight of homeless people lining up at their kitchen door begging for food from the cook. The image made a deep impression, fostering her lifelong devotion to frugality. When her father died in her 19th year, in 1952, my mother kept her inheritance, invested in the stock market, never spending a penny except to pay her college tuition. She enjoyed the trappings of wealth, but, out of a deep-seated fear of ending up poor, chose to live modestly, often buying her evening dresses second-hand, driving inexpensive cars, and carrying purses until they literally fell apart. My mother graduated from Sarah Lawrence College in 1956 and met my father just 1 year later, in September at my Aunt Betty Stroh's engagement party. Let me find a book here. Party. I need a book to put on the book, so I'll have to hold it. Let me do it, bruv. Where was the party? She'd driven her red Triumph convertible over from Chicago, where her sister, Frances, lived, to Grosse Pointe on a windy day with the top down, a yellow silk scarf trailing behind her rebellious red curls cropped short. That your little red car parked outside? My father asked when they were introduced. She told him it was. I've got the Mark 6 saloon parked near your car. Is that so? Said my mother with a flicker in her striking green eyes. Unable to stand bragging, she must have felt compelled to put the charming but arrogant Eric Stroh in his place. You'd probably love the Rolls Royce I've got back home in New Jersey. Caught off guard by this entirely, my father turned and walked away. During the engagement party weekend, my mother went out with my Uncle Peter, but when she returned for the wedding in December, my father was assigned to drive her to the rehearsal dinner, and by the end of the weekend, she found she preferred my father. I liked that he was artistic, she said, and that we both had a love of photography. They were married the following June. Ollie sat brushing my hair after my bath. You are all so lucky, Francis, she declared, suddenly surprising me. Why, Ollie? I asked, expecting something really, really big, like Christmas coming early that year. Why? Because you're rich peoples. That's why. Sorry, that's why. Rich, I imagine Rolls Royces and white marble mansions like the Beverly Hillbillies. People on TV were rich. My friends whose last names I saw on the back of cars, they were rich, but we weren't. Nobody else had ever told me we were, so how rich could we be? Besides, my father had said he couldn't pay the ransom. Moments later, I confronted my mother. Mom, are we rich? My mother's profusion of freckles seemed to darken, her broad, beautiful face clouding over with something akin to anger, as if I had spoken a four-letter word. We aren't rich and we aren't poor, she said with firm conviction. We're in the middle. This was reassuring to me. So we were normal after all, which felt safe. Kidnappers only took children from rich parents, not normal ones. If only I could make Ollie understand. I traveled to the house following the sound of the vacuum cleaner and found her in a bedroom straightening a bedspread. Mom says we aren't rich and we aren't poor, I told her. We're normal. Ollie gave me a searching look, then laughed and shook her head. She smoothed the bedspread until every crease was gone. Later that day, after she'd taken the chicken out of the oven and changed out of her crisp white uniform into what she called street clothes, I watched Ollie walk down our driveway and up Grayton Road toward the bus stop. What she had said to me, that we were lucky because we were rich, was something that she would never have said to my parents, and I wondered if she saw my parents the way I saw the Beverly Hillbillies, not as real people at all. The traffic on Grosse Pointe Boulevard was light on a Saturday. I did not feel the need to turn my head each time I heard a car approaching from behind, straining my neck so to check that my outstretched legs were safe. Make sure to hold your legs out, my mother had warned when I climbed onto the book rack behind her bike seat. Don't get them caught in the spokes. We rode this way often in the summer afternoons, careening the grid of streets, my mother stopping to greet friends she spotted on the sidewalk. We were headed to the library, where my mother would check out her monthly supply of books. Ridiculous waste of money buying books, she used to say. I loved the library's musty smell. Paging through magazines, I would be lulled into a trance by the rustling of newspaper pages around me. Until my mother finally came to collect me. Down the library steps we'd walk in the afternoon heat to where my mother's leather-seated old bicycle leaned against the brick of a wall, unlocked. She bungee-corded the books to the book rack before I got on. You add almost no weight, my mother laughed as she began to pedal. I'd hardly know you were there. Through the tree-lined streets we rode, my mother's freckled thighs slowly pumping out wire-spoked wheels along the pavement. until we arrived home with her armful of books. Ollie would be preparing lunch when we came into the house, chicken livers and green beans or hamburgers, spattering grease from the open frying pan. When I became too heavy to ride on the book rack, my mother bought me a Schwinn 3-speed with a red, white, and blue bicentennial banana seat, my most prized possession. Now I could ride anywhere in Grosse Pointe anytime I wanted, so long as I came home for dinner. My friends and I would tear around the neighborhood, barely observing stop signs or hang around Shetler's drugstore, eyeing the Revlon products. When we became hungry, we'd head up to one of the clubs for a meal, signing signing the chits with our parents' names. What the hell's a chit? My mother hated getting big bills from the club at the end of the month, so I always felt relieved if my grilled cheese ended up on someone else's check. With my new bike, I graduated to independence in the blink of an eye, but I would always miss holding on to my mother's waist, inhaling the gentle perspiration through her starched cotton blouse. In the summertime, my mother spent her afternoons playing backgammon with her friends on the upper deck of at the little club, off limits to children under the age of 18 and located just above the snack bar. The upper deck was a reliable retreat from the demands of parenting while offering a panoramic view of the club's pool, where Whitney and I spent our afternoons swimming under the idle gaze of the lifeguard or causing mischief in the locker rooms. My mother subscribed to Dr. Spock's parenting theories, which included permissiveness and a trust yourself approach to the rearing of young children. When my grandmother came for her summer visit from New Jersey, she'd sit regally on a chaise by the pool wearing a navy blue sleeveless dress, clip on gold earrings, and a branded straw hat. Mrs. Robertson looks rich, Ollie sometimes said of my grandmother. She and your daddy's mother, Mrs. Stroh, the two of them got the skin of rich folks. My grandmother would turn the pages of her Somerset Maugham novel while Whitney and I played Marco Polo or did flips off the diving board with the other kids, whose mothers reclined on towel-draped chaises. Johnson's baby oil slicked over their legs and arms. I would be tormented by the charcoal scent of burgers grilling in the snack bar or the sight of Dusty Miller sundaes carried out to the pool in tall waxed paper cups, perks of club life that Whitney and I rarely delighted in. My grandmother always chided my mother in the car after we'd left the club. Those lifeguards are fast asleep behind their sunglasses, she'd say. Someone ought to be minding the children by the pool. You worry too much, mother, my mother would reply good-humoredly. The children are just fine. I loved when my grandmother worried about us. The children looked pale, she would say as soon as she'd arrived from New Jersey, a great wave of abundance sweeping through our house in her wake. Baskets of raspberries and lushly arranged grapes filled the countertops. Lemon cakes and exotic flavored ice creams came out after dinner, so unlike my mother who bought only apples, green bananas, and vanilla ice cream at the A&P, avoiding the more expensive shops. My grandmother outfitted us for the season, too. Stiff new shoes for Whitney, a new Lily Pulitzer sundress for me, and replaced the astringent dial soaps in the showers with her own creamy Dove brand, and we all laughed out loud in the evenings when my father shouted from the shower, "Gal, where's my goddamn soap?" My mother complained that my father's compulsive collecting absorbed most of his earnings and Stroh Brewery Company dividends. Your father's spending is like a disease, she would say, but her efforts to curb his spending only made him resentful. I imagined something eating away at him from the inside, like a tapeworm or a tumor. I wondered if it was contagious. If we'd all caught it, perhaps it was only a matter of time before the scabs would appear, the lost limbs or atrophied muscles. Soon would we all be in wheelchairs like Uncle Dan, who'd lost all his muscle control like that famous basketball player, Lou Gehrig, baseball player, pardon. Only this disease seemed to travel a mysterious route. Bypassing our tissues, it simply hijacked our feelings. our perceptions, a constant sense of anxiety quelled only by the distraction of intense excitement. What was worse, the condition seemed as incurable as my mother's badgering was relentless, and sometimes I wondered if all that spending might in fact be my father's attempt at remedy rather than the disease itself. Always save for a rainy day was my mother's oft expressed motto. She sometimes called our private school to get extensions on the tuition deadlines or notified the phone company that the payment would arrive late. My mother arranged for us to have the hand me downs from her friends' children, and during the years when my father gave her no money for our vacations because he had spent everything on his collecting, we drove the 5 hours to my aunt's house in Harbor Springs. Though both my parents' families were well off financially, the Robertsons' handling of money was far more conservative than the Strohs'. As were their values. My mother had drawn from her inheritance to pay for college. My father had drawn from his to procure a fleet of Jaguars. From a distance, his largesse may have appealed to my mother initially, but up close, the two of them were like runaway trains passing in the night. My father's reckless spending accelerating with time, even as my mother's fears escalated proportionately. After swimming at the club, while all the other children signed chits for hamburgers and Cobb salads, my mother usually took us home for peanut butter and jelly sandwiches and brought us back afterward. Why can't you eat here? Our friends would ask. And feeling shamed, I lied and told them that we preferred the lunches our mother made. I believed my friends at the club were more worthy than I was, and certainly luckier. They ordered club sandwiches and cokes with a sense of abandon that I envied, while on the occasions when I was permitted to order lunch, I enjoyed my hot dog and french fries on my scoop of Stroh's peppermint ice cream with a guilty pleasure that bordered on the illicit. If I questioned my mother's policy, she reminded me the Carmichaels had to resign from the club, because those kids ran up a bill so long it arrived at their front door in a shoebox. My mother's anxieties fueled my own, and as a preteen, I shoplifted clothing and makeup from the local department stores. I even stole my first trainer bra. Part necessity, part sport, my thievery had begun in first grade when I had occasionally taken pencils and erasers from my classmates' desks, and later at sleepaway camp where I'd stolen a pair of Dr. Scholl's from a neighboring cabin only to return them later under a cloud of guilt. My middle school friends and I would take turns distracting the salesgirls while one of us slipped the desired items into a canvas tote bag, our hearts revved up on adrenaline. Somehow my mother never thought to question my burgeoning wardrobe, even after I was caught and she'd had to retrieve me from security at Hudson's department store. Perhaps she was gratified, albeit unconsciously, by this demonstration of self reliance. At those moments when her worry overwhelmed her, my mother collected clothes from the street. As with backgammon, her compulsion became a kind of hobby. I'd come home from school to find piles of found clothes, laundered and folded, or ensconced in dry cleaning bags, stacked in neat piles on my bed. Can you believe I found this on Cloverly Road? My mother said, bursting with excitement as she held up a tired old blue cloth coat. Someone's moving, and they threw it out by the curb. Have you tried it on yet? I picked up the coat. I don't like the style, I said. There's too much padding in the shoulders. I'd grown accustomed to running down such gifts, always taking care not to hurt her feelings. Undaunted, my mother would deliver the clothes to the thrift shop, the Grosse Pointe hub for second-hand finds, where she volunteered on Saturdays. Then she'd bring home a bag of second-hand clothing for which she had exchanged the original garments, and I'd have to come up with a whole new set of excuses for why I didn't want to wear them. I have enough clothes, I'd finally tell her, gesturing toward my closets. That usually ended the conversation. My mother foraged, I stole. Each of us had figured out our own way of coping with my father's disease. Wait, you stole because your dad was a fucking spendthrift? Well, is that her? Look at her. American badass right there. All right. That's all for now, bruv.